Thank you, Carl.
Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate in the United States and beyond the rich culture, history, and scholarship of Indigenous peoples. My name is Carl Reed, and I have the pleasure of serving the Northeastern University community as the head of the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. Northeastern is committed to creating a welcoming and inclusive community where individuals of all identities, backgrounds, and experiences can thrive, have a strong sense of belonging, and achieve academic, research, and professional success. To that end, we value and celebrate diversity in all its forms and strive to foster an inclusive culture built on trust, respect, understanding, and empathy. A true community that affirms our relationships and builds community, all of which is vital to learning and discovery. Today, as so many marginalized people are under assault, and in a season in which voices are being actively suppressed, at Northeastern, we're lifting the voices, the scholarship, and the rich research of Indigenous scholars from across the global university system. I'm delighted that this event is designed and produced by members of the Northeastern's Native and Indigenous Affinity Group, one of 8 that exists to build community, expand knowledge, and build support for members of the identity groups and their allies. For more information about affinity groups or to join one, please visit the ODEI website at northeastern.edu/diversity. It is customary, especially today, that we recognize the land on which 2 of Northeastern's campuses reside. Every community owes its existence and strength to the generations before them, who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this movement. Truth and acknowledgement are critical in building mutual respect and connections across all barriers of heritage and difference. I acknowledge the territory in which Northeastern University stands and the surrounding areas of Boston and Cambridge as the original lands of the Wampanoag and the Massachusetts peoples. The state of Massachusetts is home to the Mashpee Wampanoag, the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead, and the Nipmuc nations. We acknowledge the New England region as a territory home of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wabanaki Confederacy, and the Algonquin peoples. We also acknowledge that we on the Mills College of Northeastern campus in Oakland occupy the land of the Ramaytush, Ohlone, and the Mamekma peoples. With this land acknowledgement, I also wish to acknowledge Indigenous peoples' right to persist in and with our languages. Land and language are inextricably linked to our existence. Now, with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Patricia St. Onge. Patricia is chaplain and elder in residence at Mills College at Northeastern University. She taught ethnic studies at Mills College for several years and is a coach and spiritual director, working with groups as well as individuals. Patricia is the founder of 7 Generations Consulting and Coaching, working primarily with social justice organizations on issues of organizational effectiveness and deep culture. She's also the lead author of Embracing Cultural Competency, a roadmap for nonprofit capacity builders, published by Fieldstone Alliance. Please welcome the chaplain.
Unmute. There we go. Yawangoa, thank you. Aguego onska ondi dewa wenoni ne nguanigura tano te nu werado ne Onge sua tano oloni ne aguego skona aganage ji deota worie ne yohonsate. Let us gather up our minds and bundle them up as one mind as we send love, greetings, and gratitude to all of the people here and those who would like to be here but can't. And to the Ohlone people on whose territory we in Oakland are guests. Let us send love out to people everywhere, that peace may always prevail as we mingle here together on Mother Earth. Te nu wiradone, yeti nistonha ahunja. And let us now send love and gratitude to our Mother, the Earth, because she gives us all we need to flourish. Ito Nyodunhak Nengonigura. And now our minds are one. Every Mohawk, every Haudenosaunee gathering starts with these, what are called the words that come before all else, or the Thanksgiving address. And so this is a snippet. It can take a long, long time to say the words before all else. And so I wanted to start with just a tiny bit of the greeting and welcome you all here today. We're very, I'm honored to be facilitating this conversation. And we have three panelists, and Ellen Cushman, Natalee Kehaulani Bauer, and Sebastian Ellington Flying Eagle Ebarb. We're gonna, I'll do a deeper introduction for each of them before they speak, but I wanted to just let you know who's on the panel. So we'll start with Ellen Cushman, who is Cherokee, is the Dean's Professor of Civic Sustainability and Professor of English at Northeastern University, and a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Her work explores how people use literacy and language to endure and create change. She's the project leader of the Digital Archive of Indigenous Languages Persistence that seeks to create a reading and writing environment for the translation of Cherokee language manuscripts. And so, Ellen, do you want to go ahead and start?
Haudenosaunee, thank you for your introduction. Pat, it's very nice to meet you and very nice to be here today. Osiyonegada tahiche, slowly dawadoa, chalagi, chichalagi geya. Ellen Cushman, Dawadoa, Yonek. And today I'd like to talk with you a little bit about what we've been working on in the Digital Archive of Indigenous Language Persistence. And to do that, I have just a few slides to show you. Great. Terrific. So I've been introduced, and it's my pleasure to be here today with you. And I'd like to give you a sense of what we'll be talking about today very quickly, an overview of DELP, something about the reading environment, and I'll take you inside that just very quickly here, the writing environment that we've been working on and the significance of this work. And really what this project aims to do is to help persist in Indigenous languages overall. More specifically, Cherokee people have been prolific writers in their language ever since the 1820s, when a Cherokee man named Sequoyah first introduced our 86-character Cherokee syllabary. The Cherokee syllabary was the first writing system ever developed and used by an Indigenous nation in the United States. And within years of its creation, Cherokee people practiced widespread reading and writing. Today, over 2,000 manuscript pages, like the one pictured here, can be found inked in the syllabary in archives all around the country. DELP seeks to provide a means for reading and translating these manuscripts to further documentation of our languages, but also to bring us together to be able to continue practicing the reading and writing that we're seeing in these manuscripts and saying these words aloud. Now, we proved the concept of our archive in 2021 with just a small corpus, around 35 Cherokee language manuscripts that were deeply annotated, and we demonstrated a robust reading environment that resulted from these community-based translation practices with our small group of students, translators, teachers, and students. And with that proof of concept in hand, we received generous support to prototype and create reusable components of a reading and writing environment for community-based translation. As we prototype this, we also scaled up the number of contributors that we have from our community to include more teachers, more learners, a number of Cherokee speakers, and to deepen our relationship between language persistence and language preservation. We're extraordinarily grateful for the support that we have received that allows us to not only pay our Northeastern students, but to more importantly, or equally importantly, pay our community members to practice our languages and persist in them. Our DELP team has been, since the beginning, a community-based team focused in all aspects of our work, be it digital, translation, grant making, or workflows that we have created. All of these help play a key role in developing our site content and our translations. There we go. Our translations. You'll see here a rolling list of all of our contributors to the current team. Now, the team began its work with over 100 documents given to us by Ernestine Berry, who is the director of the John Hare Cultural Resource Center at the United Keetoowah Band of the Cherokee Indians in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. We've worked as well with Eastern Band Cherokee Indians and Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma to create several of these translations. And you'll also see a number of our students and faculty members and linguists who have been included in our project. From the ground up, all of these community members give us a sense of what we're doing well with our designs, how we can improve our translations, and how we can improve our site. I'd like to take you into our reading environment. If you have your cell phones handy, you can link to the site very easily here. I'm going to leave that up for just a second. Cherokee's Writing the Keetoowah Way, CWKW, is the first fully scaled digital edited collection of Cherokee language manuscripts produced from our site and our community-based work together. In this project and in this reading environment, we have over 87 works that have been organized into funeral notices, letters, stories, and governance documents. Again, these were chosen by our translators in the United Keetoowah Band Cherokee of Cherokee Indians, and we largely followed their lead in how and what documents we included and what documents we translated. When they gave us those translations, it allowed us to figure out together what each word meant, because each word is very complicated, as you'll see. We include as well some introductory material, and I'm very, very pleased about our resources that include instructional materials so that you can use in further reading and writing all of the resources that you're seeing translated there. When you go into our translations, one of the things that we love is that you can select any word that you would like, and it brings up what we have here as a word pane. And you'll see that we include audio for each one of those words, as well as our deep linguistic annotation of them. This word pane is not only proof of concept that we can display back all of our language information that we've now encoded into our digital collection, but it allows you to hear the language spoken. It allows you to isolate what each part of a word might be bringing in terms of semantic content or grammatical content. And then it allows for commentary from our community members. What will be really lovely about this, and it's already pretty lovely if you ask me, but I'm a little biased, is that it also lends itself to the writing environment. So that word pane that we have here fits perfectly inside a cell phone, if you will. Displays well inside of a cell phone if you were to view it in a cell phone. And this will allow our community members to very quickly read a document that they see somewhere, either in print or on a screen, and record audio of it, or track in the community meaning of it, or to tell a story about that person in that document or that place in that document. And we deepen our annotations and our collections that way, but more importantly, we continue to learn and practice our language together. When they enter that through the word pane in our writing environment, they'll actually be submitting information directly into our database that we will then display outward in our collections. But what does this all mean to everybody involved in this project? And what does it mean to, in particular, our Cherokee language speakers? What do they get out of that? Well, let's take a listen to John Chewy, if we can. And if somebody could give me a heads up to make sure that this is still.
Those words are very important, even though the old people that wrote those down, they just assumed everybody knew what they meant, and maybe some of the older ones did. Well, for me, I had forgotten them because nobody uses those words anymore. So when I saw those and then I knew what they meant because I had heard them. I had never seen them in writing, but I had heard some of the older ones telling some different stories and using those words. And I thought, wow, that's what that meant. That's what it means,
Wow. So you're learning new things from doing the project too.
Very much so. I've learned quite a bit, about those stories and how, especially how the Cockatoos must have lived in those days, how they lived and how they were very community oriented, how they looked out for one another. Like this one story, I don't remember who was it. He always made a big garden, and then he had storehouses for anyone that had hardships in the wintertime. Well, he had storehouses where they supplied supplies to help those that became in need. Those.
Excuse me.
Those words are
Nope.
very.
There we are. Sorry about that. One of the things that we're gathering from this project is not just that it's meaningful for our community members, and it gives them reasons to practice this and gives them practice in reading and writing and hearing words that are less spoken and less frequently spoken today, but it also creates context, reasons to practice the Cherokee language. And we're very blessed to have many exceptional educational programs that all three of our federally recognized tribes develop and run. And yet, when individuals leave these programs, they go into English-speaking context and have very few opportunities to continue to practice their language. And so those skills need to be continued to practice. And we can do that together and expand our understanding of our language into the process. What we love about this as well is that we're integrating support into the language persistence along the way and providing all kinds of meaningful reasons to build databases for our students, to do linguistic analysis for our linguists and linguistic students, and to create web content together that is meaningful to several community members. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ellen. Language is such a powerful thing. And I really appreciate that you started us off by talking about the language of the Cherokee Nation. Now we want to hear from Natalee Kehaulani Bauer. Natalee is Kanaka Maoli, which translates Native Hawaiian, Associate Adjunct Professor of Indigenous Studies, and the May Treat Morrison Endowed Professorship in American Studies at Mills College at Northeastern University, Oakland campus. Dr. Bauer taught in the San Francisco Bay Area Public Schools for 8 years before completing her doctorate at UC Berkeley in 2017. Entered the Mills classroom. Just a note, I know she was a student here too, back in the day. Her book, Tender Violence in U.S. Schools, Benevolent Whiteness and the Dangers of Heroic White Womanhood, published by Routledge, deploys indigenous feminist methodologies to understand the problem of the over-disciplining of Black and Native students. Natalee, welcome.
Thank you, Pat. I'm going to jump in right away because I've already prepared something that's 2 minutes longer than it should have been. So one of the most persistent and dangerous tropes we have about teaching in the United States is that it's an act of individual heroism. We're inundated with memoirs, movies, viral videos, always celebrating the individual teacher and her capacity to save the individual problem students, and therefore, by extension, to solve the problems of educational and social systems. This narrative is particularly dangerous because of the virtually unexamined history of gendered white supremacy that shaped and continues to inform it. The trope of teachers as heroes is entangled in settler colonial histories of white women teachers, resulting in data that show now, despite a steady increase in students of color in the United States, our teachers remain predominantly white, middle class, and female, a statistic that has been true since the formalization of schooling in the mid-19th century. Relatedly important in educational research, the over-disciplining of Black and Indigenous students is most often presented as a problem that's located within pathologized or misunderstood communities. So this book thus takes as a provocation this discipline gap and asks how white women have historically understood and amplified their roles in the disciplining of Black and Indigenous students, and how and why their role has been constructed over time and space in service to not education, but to the institutions of the white settler colonial state. So the three main chapters of this book focus on three different missionary women across three geographic locales in the mid-19th century: Hawaii, Dakota Territory, and the post-war US South immediately after emancipation. So these histories, along with their contemporary reincarnations, justify a belief in the inherent pathology of Black and Indigenous communities and reinforce our collective imagining of the heavy but necessary white woman's burden to save communities. While I rely in my book on traditional historical methods, my epistemic framework is grounded in Indigenous methodology and an understanding of the power of discourse and storytelling. In order to destabilize what we have collectively come to understand about schools as the truth, I build upon Indigenous understandings of the power of words and stories and the related knowledge that those who control the narratives create the truth. So while this book centers the stories and diaries of white women, it does so only to highlight whiteness as not something normative or heroic, but as something persistently violent and influential in the formation and ongoing legacy of schooling in the United States. So in the book, I offer a genealogical analysis of what I call benevolent whiteness, which is the self-imposed, selfless service and heroic identity of white womanhood in relation to people of color through systematic schooling as the feminized arm of white supremacy. To do this, I build on the methodological approaches of other Kanaka Maoli scholars, using a comparative genealogical approach by putting Foucauldian genealogy and Kanaka Oiwi Mo'uku Auhau, which loosely translates to genealogy, in conversation with each other to bridge ideas and understand subjectivity through power or mana, trace the discursive conditions of the emergence of white womanhood as an inherently benevolent subject, specifically in schooling. In other words, I'm attempting to use their own words to really make visible what is happening. Building on our understandings of Mo'uku Auhau as something that brought and brings Kanaka comfort in times of acute distress, I actually attempt to expand its methodological power to propose that it can also be used to discomfort, and in this case, to discomfort whiteness as an ideology and to unsettle this idea of heroic white womanhood. In this manner, I propose that these diaries can be used to rewrite cultural memory and the false nostalgia of a romanticized heyday of fair and equitable public schooling. So in other words, if their confessional literature was at the time an intentional and powerful tool in reinforcing settler genealogies and futurities, using those same texts and tools to instead deconstruct discourses and power is a way in which Indigenous methodologies destabilize and reject settler colonial narratives of our past and also interrupt settler futurity. So my theorization of benevolent whiteness is based on the analysis of these women's diaries and letters, as well as some ethnographic data that I gathered in Bay Area public schools. And to just point out that at the time, in the mid-19th century, women's journals, missionary journals, were as widely read as today's audiences read social media. So they were very much used to construct what is the truth, like capital truth. So I've distilled these down to 4 key logics. And I think I'm going to attempt to share my screen so that you can better see this. Okay. Golden. So first, the key logic of benevolent whiteness is that it's actually gendered female. Oh, my slides aren't moving. Oh, well. It's gendered female and it operates through formalized white supremacy. And it's always carried out by teachers who come from the outside of the community. Secondly, it is literally and figuratively displacing teachers and parents of color within school communities and replacing them with heroic teachers who know better, who are better informed and better able to reach and teach the children. Thirdly, benevolent whiteness is rooted in an idea of multi-directional salvation. So there's a need to simultaneously save peoples whose salvation will always remain incomplete, as well as saving oneself as the missionary, as the teacher, as the person bringing good. Historically, it should be remembered that the impetus for missionaries was not first to bring salvation to the globe. It was to save oneself, to demonstrate to God your worthiness, and you're demonstrating your love to God when you travel across the world. It's only a secondary goal to bring other dark souls toward the light. And then it's sort of a third, fourth, fifth goal to actually educate folks, right? And the educating folks to read was just simply so that they could then read the Bible, not necessarily, you know, what we imagine schooling to be for, right? That whole history of what we think back in the day, school used to do this, it actually never did. And the final characteristic of benevolent whiteness is that it operates through this language of love, which I argue is an act of settler colonial violence in itself when it's invoked by missionary teachers toward the very people they're colonizing. To understand love language as colonial violence in the most reductive sense, I'm referring to the ways in which teachers participate in settler colonialism through this discourse of, I'm doing this for your own good. I'm doing this because I love you. One of the dangers of this comes from the power of love language to obfuscate complicity in colonial violence. And so that is exactly what's under analysis in this book. When love language is invoked in this manner, it's not a genuine manner, genuine love. It's more of a manipulative countermeasure meant to deflect from any sort of self-reflection or interrogating one's own participation in oppressive behaviors or outcomes. So it's the logical fallacy of, if I am this, loving, I can't also be that, participating in oppression. So through the book, by naming and understanding this, I encourage readers to find inspiration in the ways in which Black and Indigenous peoples survive and thrive despite this violence, whether it's violence happening through, loving discourse in schools, or the more legible state violence that we experience. And I just, I think that I just wanted to sort of end on more of a hopeful futuristic note that despite the violence and oppression that's happened over centuries, Black and Indigenous communities, often in relationship to one another, have persistently valued education for its emancipatory potential. And it's a potential to which most of our schools are not measuring up. Yet we continue to work within and outside of settler state systems to carry ourselves and our communities toward freedom. But to be clear, we are not resigned to settler futurities that require our relentless, nonstop swimming upstream to work against our erasure in the past and the future. And because of that, we too need a way forward. And we can just sort of leave the settler state behind to collapse on itself, which I believe it will. So in that spirit, I conclude my book with an imperative that any real possibilities for anti-colonial, anti-racist, emancipatory education has to be envisioned through the interrelated lenses of Black and Indigenous futurity and led by our communities themselves. And just end there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Natalee. This is proving to be a really wonderful unfolding of a story and a reality and an experience of communities that I think is very rich. So thank you both, Ellen and Natalee. And now we want to turn to Sebastian. Sebastian Ellington Flying Eagle Ebarb is a graphic designer based in Boston. As a member of the Choctaw Apache tribe of Ebarb, He has spent his years working to revive, hold, and reverse his native revere. So sorry. Just one little letter. Revere his native heritage. He's a teaching professor of design at Northeastern and is a founding owner of the design studio Nahi, which means we in Apache. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you so much. Let me just switch over to my slides. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and to talk about some of my work. So obviously, as a teaching professor, I do get some time, which is lovely, to work on some projects that I care about. So I spend a lot of that time working on my own tribe and helping them where possible. But through Nahi, with my partner, Riley, who's stationed on the West Coast, we get to work on some pretty amazing things outside of the tribe. So most recently, you'll probably be seeing, for those of you who are in the Massachusetts area, you'll probably see my work roll out for the town of Natick, where I, over the last summer, redesigned their pretty racist town seal into something that is much more, hopefully, palatable for all involved. So it was officially recognized again just at the end of the summer and is now being rolled out across the board. But as I said, my personal work in itself, when I talk about being a designer, and where it comes to Northeastern, comes in kind of two different forms. I work, again, around Indigenous issues, but then I also work in gov-related issues. Before coming here to Northeastern, I was the design director for the city of Boston for about 7 years, and helping them and other cities rebrand and provide better communications for better services. But today, let's focus on just some of this work here. So the first kind of work that I got a chance to kind of jump into today is what I'm specifically doing for my own tribe. One of the big issues that we are currently facing is that a number of folks have moved away for economic opportunity, have moved away for a variety of different reasons. And so most of our tribal members are now spread across the globe, with about a little under half of them in what is our ancestral homelands in Louisiana, which originally were actually stolen and then flooded, which now makes currently the reservoir for both Texas and a large swath of Texas and a large swath of Louisiana. And unfortunately, much of our cultural heritage was buried and flooded, and so it's hard to access that information. And because we are so diffused, one of the things that we have worked towards is finding ways for folks to come together, especially in a digital format, in order to share information. And so one of the first ways that we did that was providing safe spaces on platforms like Facebook and Instagram as ways of people to be able to connect and share information and just revel in who they are as tribal members, and just to learn more about their heritage. Since many folks have been told, not all, but some folks have been told that they're Native and are trying to come back and reconnect, since we are such a small tribe. And so in that, pulling from and finding out my own visual tradition has been an incredibly strong part of what I'm moving forward to. What you see here are some examples of some of the pieces that I've created for that tribal connection, utilizing symbols that span multiple tribes, or what others would consider multiple tribes, but come together to make our tribe. So what you see here is actually a mix of symbols. Some people from different tribes might see different parts of themselves in what's here, but they have come together to make something new, and rather not new, but to make something that's whole and beautiful within our community. So for instance, the dragonflies that you see at the bottom, the mountain peaks, and connection, which is and if you can see the bend here is part of a larger, normally Choctaw symbol of the great serpent. And so utilizing these connections, we are continuing to create a stronger community. And in that community, one of the things that we are currently working on too is a digital library that will only be accessible to community members. We are slowly beginning to build this. This is almost like the first time we're saying it publicly, but we have started to collect information, collect stories, and are trying to find better ways for us to communicate through a digital platform so that everybody within the tribe has access to this information. And part of this is taking in outside resources and making sure that we are recognizing that the resources that are describing us as a tribe and who we are from the outside are not necessarily always accurate, but that putting it all in one place so people have the ability to find this information is incredibly important. And so within that connection, what we're doing is small steps in between. We are currently working, we've produced one, but we are currently working on expanding a culture camp for our youth. And we are building, as you can see here, here are some images specifically from our coloring book that will be given to small children, which is accompanied by text and word searches. Unfortunately, the language that was mostly spoken has gone dormant for the tribe, but we have languages that are adjacent to, such as Apache and Choctaw, that tribal members are looking to revive within our own tribe as a way to recognize our various different heritage. And so, for instance, the word search is going to be in both Apache and Choctaw. So that way everybody can see their beautiful lineages brought together. And so here are some of the examples of, right now, I think we're going to have about 20 pages, and every year we hope to put out a new one, so that way we are constantly re-involving our youth, not just for the culture camp itself, which will happen next, I believe, June, but then also throughout the year and continuously putting out new information and a visual representation so that people can continue to connect. One of the things that I'm also currently working on outside of my tribe is I've created I'm working with GNU. For those who don't know GNU, it's one of, I think, the only Native American genes company in the United States. And we're working with them to provide visibility on a number of different levels, but creating new fashion statements for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks. Here is some of the materials that I made for them most recently. But we are building out a larger collection, and they work with a number of different folks from across Turtle Island. And I applaud them for the work that they're doing in order to kind of represent the culture and bring it more to the forefront. Excuse me. And here comes my son to join me. You want to come say hi? No, we don't want to say hi. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, so with that, I'm working on a number of different platforms in a number of different ways. Okay, so you are going to come say hi. This is Luca. Can you say hello? Hi. So we're working on a number of different platforms in a number of different ways in order to talk about the broader sense of what indigeneity is, and how also we as a tribe can come together to create more meaningful exchanges as we continue to proliferate across the United States. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is, yeah, let's just take a minute to breathe in all of what we just heard. It's very powerful. So there's a lot to be said about what the enterprise of colonization has been and what its impact has been. And one thing came to mind as you were talking, all three of you, is that in order to colonize a people, you need to disrupt their land, their language, and their legacy. And the legacy is the stories and the children. It's the achievements and the accomplishments. So by disrupting all of that, people have to remember themselves and remember their stories and their history. And so language and art and community are the ways that are some of the strategies that Indigenous communities are using today. So I wanted to give the panelists a few 5 or 6 minutes to engage with each other. So if you have questions for each other, this is a time. And I want to just say again, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Pat. That was a surprise that we were going to engage.
Oh,
Well, no, I have I don't know if it's so much of a question, but sort of a response to what you said, which leads into the work that Ellen and Sebastian are doing. You mentioned that colonialism depends on the children. And that always reminds me of this little line in a history book I read once that said the folks doing the colonization, the missionaries who were, encouraged by the US government, funded by the US government, said, this is not a direct quote, but more or less, it will take us in only one generation to, with children, what would have taken us 3 generations of genocide. Right? So it was very clear that they knew that going into schools, going into children, indoctrinating children, colonizing children would do the work that 3 generations of blood and violence and everything else would have taken. So I love that the work that Sebastian and Ellen are doing. I have a good friend who is doing similar work. She just made a language coloring book for the Hawaiian language. And I know here in Oakland, we have, oh man, I'm going to forget Karina's Gold's daughter. Deja, who's doing the language revitalization as well. So I've been trying to connect her with Ellen.
great.
So there's no question.
Thank you for those very kind words, Pat, and for that lovely connection, Natalee. Absolutely. One of the things that I loved about our panels is the ways in which they spoke to each other by way of designs, be those epistemic designs or visual designs or structuring principles for language and knowledge and knowing, and how it is that we can unwrite them together through praxis with our peoples and praxis with our communities. So I very much appreciate hearing more about your work and about it, and just generally this opportunity to visit with everybody here about it and hear more about it. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, it's really amazing to hear all of y'all's work, because you get snippets here and there when you talk to folks or you read a little article piece. And so I think one of the amazing things is how many ways that people can think about how to talk about not just history but the present, and how do we kind of span that and have that conversation. And I think that's one of the nice things about talking to y'all right now and hearing what everybody's doing, is that we're doing both. We can talk about history and we can talk about what needs to be fixed there, but we can also talk about how we can be the best versions of ourselves given settler colonialism, and how we can move forward in like a really beautiful way.
Great. Yes,
Yeah.
totally agree with all of you. So we want to open it up now. We have a few minutes. If anybody in the audience has questions, if you can use your little icon to raise your hand, then I'll know that, because I don't see all of you at the same time. So if I don't, there we go. Now I do. So does anybody have any questions?
It looks like there's one up in what's the left corner of my screen.
George. Okay, thank you.
Hello,
Thanks, Laura.
I've got a, can I ask my question?
Yes, yes.
So I've got a question, and I've heard the answer before, but I can't recall. And so I guess this is most appropriate for Professor Cushman, about language and the importance, because I imagine that there were hundreds, thousands, I don't know that much about Native peoples, I'm sorry, but thousands of languages, and it's really impressive the work you're doing with the language. But what's the importance of preserving and practicing a language? I know it's tied to culture, but that's just maybe you can talk in general terms for those of us who are not academics. I'm not an academic. I work at Northeastern, but I'm far from an academic. I'm just not a very smart fundraiser for the university. But so if you can help us out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, George. I appreciate that. And very quickly, for almost every Native person that I've ever spoken with has mentioned the close connection between their own understandings of themselves as people, connected to land, connected to histories, connected to ceremonies, and the importance of language in and of itself to constitute those connections, and to breathe life into the life ways that is encoded in those languages. And so there's some really interesting ways in which that works semantically and grammatically that would probably be a little bit too much in the weeds to talk about right now. But it's the difference between understanding truth as an objective reality that we can all agree on, and the understanding of truth as in being influenced by the sacred fire. In Cherokee, that's dohi or udohi, and how it is that even that simple word suggests a very different constellation of meaning than you might find in saying truly or truth itself. And so it relocates how you understand knowledge, essentially. And I think that might even get to a little bit perhaps to Carl's question. I'm not going to handle Carl's question. I'm going to hand it off to Natalee, because her book really does focus on this so beautifully, and to Sebastian, because they're really knee-deep in settler colonialism. And Carl asks, we use the phrase settler colonialism. What does that mean?
Yes. So I think folks have sort of an understanding of what colonialism is, right? They think of things like colonial Williamsburg, and we think of people, the colonies. So Patrick Wolfe is known as sort of the most cited person for saying that settler colonialism is a structure and not an event. So one of the things that I try to help get students to understand is that it isn't a thing that happened in time. It's not like the colonial period of the United States, right? It's what structured the forming of the United States. And it continues to persist to this day because of that. It's like if you imagine a building or a house, the foundation, right? You can change the paint and the shutters and all of those things, but the foundation remains the same. And one of the, I think it may be a bit reductive, but one of the differences that I like to outline to students is that traditional colonialism goes to a place, extracts resources, right? Maybe extracts labor, and then eventually leaves, or maybe doesn't leave, but it's extractive, right? Settler colonialism comes to replace, and that's the key difference, right? It comes to replace and displace the Indigenous people who are already there. So there is, well, I don't want to put things into a hierarchy of violence, but I think that's one of the key differences. Sebastian, maybe if I left anything out.
I mean, you nailed it. I think I tend to put it in simpler terms, and I was just like the United States and its government. And when I say the United States, I don't mean the physical land that is currently referred to as the United States. So I'll say that for my sake. I don't speak for everybody, but that is my opinion. And so a recognition that it is ongoing to this day, without question, in my mind.
Thank you. So there's a practical question in the about who funds your research. I don't know how much time you want to take on that, but if you have any quick response, I guess somebody's
my job at Northeastern as a teaching professor allows me to do the work that I do. Nahi is a pay what you can studio, so often we work for free or for trade or barter. So the fact that I can have a full-time job allows me to do that in my off time. And then the work that I do for the tribe, I often do out of my own pocket for printing materials and things like that. We're working towards getting grants and things like that, but that will happen down the road.
Thank you. I think that's really a culturally appropriate response that feels right, that we do the work of the heart and then we figure out how to pay for it is often the dynamic in Indigenous communities. So thank you, Sebastian, for all that you do for in trade and
Patricia, I think there are two hands up. I don't know if you see that.
Alice.
Oh, actually, sorry, I should have lowered my hand. I have the same question. I was wondering, especially considering how important the linguistic tools and the culture of the nations are to this country, does National Library of Congress fund this research that goes into the development of linguistic tools of the nations and the rest of the culture?
Hmm.
Thank you for that question. More so, the National Archive has funded that, and I haven't sought funding from the Library of Congress, but it's a great idea to pursue. The National Science Foundation does some work with language documentation, but tends to really focus on linguistic analysis by linguists. And since I'm not a linguist, it doesn't set me up very well to approach that money. But I do want to acknowledge that the Henry K. Luce Foundation, after the 6 or so years of us struggling to find funding, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or so of us trying to find funding and paying for things out of pocket, we were able to convince them with the help of Northeastern University's Tier 1 grant, with scholarships that the students have received through work study, and with really generous research grants from the College of Social Science and Humanities that I've been able to give to our undergraduates. We were able to, from the Northeastern research, student research as well, we've been able to piece together what helped us design the proof of concept. Once we had that,
Great.
funders came in a little bit
Great,
more.
thank you. So we have about 3 minutes left. Macy, do you have a quick question?
Yes, it's very quick. I just wanted to ask if the recording will be available online. I know a lot of peers and colleagues who would also be really curious to learn from everything presented today.
Does anybody have the answer to that?
Yes.
So,
go ahead, please. Lisa,
No, I was
jump in. Lisa, you want?
No, go ahead, Carl.
It will be available. I think we'll post it up on our Affinity group site on the ODEI, on the ODEI site, and we'll send it out to those who registered for the event as well. Macy, thank you for that question. I know, look at that beautiful baby.
Okay, thanks. Is that it's a hand waving. Okay. So there's a huge question. Yes, Alex, I believe that's a very big question. As experiential educators have to engage Native American communities, what resources exist for doing it ethically and well? That's a whole other conversation, I think. And we have about a minute left. So I don't know if there's a forum at Northeastern where we can engage questions ongoing like this, but it feels really important. So one of the administrators, do you have a thought about that?
Yes, thank you. And I would recommend the community engaged teaching and research, teaching and learning community engaged Becca Berkey's group. They produced, along with Rebecca Riccio, I believe it's the Center for Social Change, an anti-oppressive or anti-exploitive policy for community engaged research that's published. And I think that it is appropriate in engaging communities like this as well.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Nyawangoa, big thank you for joining us today. And as we've heard, there are often multiple perspectives through which we can engage our stories as humans. Let's remember that the stories we've often been told don't tell the whole experience of all the relatives, human and non, who are impacted by those stories and experiences. As we close, let's seek to remember the history, the narrative, through the lens of multiple experiences. Let's be rigorous in our commitment to Indigenous scholarship, even as we're joyful in our celebration of the first peoples of the land that we share. Agwego onska ondidewa wenoni ne ngwanigura. And now together, let us gather up all of our greetings and gratitude and love into one big bundle and release it up into the sky. Thankful for this beautiful gathering today. To nyo wenage. And these are all the words. So thank you, everybody.
Wado negada. Thank you, Pat. Beautiful words.
Yakoke, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.
Oh.
Right.
Ta-da! Oops, I guess I should end the recording first. Ta-da!